What is up, sports fans? What is up, Seattle Mariners fans? We are officially one series now into the 2025 Major League Baseball season. The Mariners getting a 2-2 split against the Athletics, the cityless Athletics, to open up the 2025 season. And the Mariners offense, I would say, a little frustrating to watch at times, but it was at least nice to get to watch some real baseball again, some regular season games. I got to go to opening day. I seemed to be the right game to go to. The offense that day seemed to be working, at least in the late innings, with Jorge Polanco and Randy Arozarena playing hero with their late inning home runs to get that opening day win. But then right back down the mountain, unfortunately, just a lot of fear amongst Mariners fans, myself included, that they just, well, at least in that 7-0 shutout on Saturday, played pretty terribly. And we'll go over kind of how their offense looked. And frankly, we need to go over just how the team looked in general. So I wanted to do a little bit of like what you call a post-mortem from this MLB opening weekend series for the Mariners as they turn right back around. I am taping this episode just before they face off against the Detroit Tigers. Emerson Hancock going to be pitching against the Mariners. And yeah, guess what? They're going to be facing off against Tarek Skubal. So not going to get any easier for Seattle, and a lot of strikeouts against a lot of mediocre pitchers, in my opinion. Not the best way to start this season, but we'll get into all of that. Welcome on into this episode of Bleav In Mariners. I'm Schultzy, Jordon Schultz, whichever one you want to call me. I am a talk show host based out of Portland, Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. Usually work at 1080 The Fan, sports radio 1080 The Fan here in Portland, but I have been a diehard longtime Mariners fan, bled the teal ever since I was a kid. So really enjoy doing this podcast for Bleav and really enjoy interacting with all y'all. I'm on Twitter or on X, whatever you want to call it now, on the air, Jordan with an O, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Bleav In Mariners, and interact with the show there. All right, so let's get into basically just kind of an overall question of how this team in its different aspects looked in its first 4 games of the regular season. And then to end the show, a little bit of a report, actually an awesome report from the Seattle Times about those new Torpedo bats that the New York Yankees were reportedly using and went off with like 9 home runs in one game for their opening weekend series in Major League Baseball. So we'll dive into that report from Adam Jude in the Seattle Times. Really, really good stuff. Sounds like Seattle's going to be getting their hands on some of those Torpedo bats. So I'll give you my reaction to end the episode. But got to ask about the Mariners offense, the Mariners defense, and we'll kind of take a look at what their bullpen and starting pitching did through the first 4 games of the regular season. Heard this question asked on Seattle Sports Monday morning to start the week of their sports coverage, but it's a really great question to ask, and I feel like a lot of Mariners fans were already asking it over the weekend on social media, and that's, does the offense look any better? Is this 2025 Mariners offense, which essentially is the same group of guys run back minus a Justin Turner, who wasn't even acquired until midseason anyways, but basically the same group of guys run back, and we're told that, well, the philosophy's changed, the approach has changed. Guys like J.P. Crawford and Jorge Polanco are healthy. That's changed. We've got a young, exciting player in Ryan Bliss to solve the second base problem. That's changed. Well, does this offense look any better in this opening series as compared to, say, maybe even September of last year, or going further into, some of their dog days in the summer before that? I would say yes and no. Like I said, we got to go over all of these things. We got to go over the bullpen. We got to go over the defense, the starting pitching, but I want to start with the offense. So does the offense look any better? Like I said, I would say yes and no. Of course, you saw some stolen bases. You saw some aggressiveness. I love the Mariners trying to do that, get the game moving. I am all for. They've got some speed in their lineup. I'm all for them trying to take advantage of it. I Bleav they were like 5 of 5 or 6 of 6 for stolen base attempts in their first 4 games. So it's nice to see them doing that. And frankly, maybe they didn't get a bunch of hits that we're going to point out here in just a second. But frankly, I did see a nice positive in them getting walks and actually working the count a little bit. Cal Raleigh, yeah, he only had like 1 hit through the first 4 games of the regular season, but he drew a couple of walks as well. That's what we know Cal Raleigh to do. And frankly, that's why I'm never upset with his .220 batting average. And that's why he's the best catcher in all of Major League Baseball. He's hitting 30 bombs, 100 RBIs, and he actually has an on-base percentage of way closer, to like 300 than people would actually think. Even though he's only hitting .220, throws out the best or the biggest number of runners trying to steal bases in the last 2 seasons. Like, Cal's the best overall, but he had a bad opening series, 1 hit only, but still a couple of walks. So I'm not so concerned. But then really the story of the offense, Jorge Polanco and Julio Rodriguez hitting game-winning home runs, keeping the M's at 500. Of course, Julio's on Sunday and Jorge Polanco's on Thursday for opening day. And Mariners PR put out a great tweet for that. Julio Rodriguez and Jorge Polanco each hitting game-winning bombs in the 6th inning or later against the Athletics. It's the first time since they played the Toronto Blue Jays back in July of 2022 that the Mariners have hit multiple game-winning home runs in the same series. So got to focus on some of the positives. Hey, they're doing things that we haven't seen them doing, but they're also doing things that we have seen them doing before. I mean, Jorge Polanco showing signs of maybe a bounce back season, for like batting 5 for 10. So it's early to call it like a 500 season, but he's hitting 500 so far. Already got 3 RBIs in that home run. And then Julio with that crucial 2-run homer. Thank goodness that we've got those positives to lean on. But even though it's nice to see like a Rosarena hitting that game-tying home run, unfortunately got robbed a couple of times. A really, really hard hit ball, I think, with at least 2 runners on early in that game on Friday or Saturday, and hit basically right to the second baseman. Turned into a pretty quick double play. Yeah, no, actually the bases were loaded now that I think about it. And then another ball by Randy Arozarena, again with the bases loaded, absolutely jacked to left center field. But basically the marine layer of wind keeping that down and putting it right into the young Max Muncy's glove. No, not the Dodgers corner infielder, but the young prospect for the Athletics, Max Muncy. And according to some stats I saw on X, it was a 28-foot difference that the wind made on that ball. It knocked it down 28 feet. Arozarena hit a bomb. It should have been a grand freaking salami that day, but it wasn't. The same thing happened to Mitch Garver, unfortunately, as well. He had another near homer or a homer taken away by the marine layer. We saw that one affected by up to 20 feet, according to a couple of different tweets on X. So, I mean, there are still some really good things there, but and unfortunately, just like with any other offense, you're going to see some balls that are hit really hard and you just get unlucky with. But I think the Mariners are dealing with a little bit more than that, dealing with that marine layer. But beyond that, unfortunately, along with the good, there is the bad and the stuff that we've already seen from this offense. Struggling at times. They had that 7-0 shutout in game 2. Outside of I think it was the bases loaded with the Arozarena that game. I don't believe they had runners on base a lot every game, and that is something to look at. They had a lot of walks. They didn't have a lot of hits, but they took a lot of walks. But they still, outside of like loading the bases and not able to cash in with that Randy Arozarena opportunity just because of bad luck early in that game on Friday. You hope that the narrative we've been hearing all offseason into this season is actually true, that, the offensive approach actually is different under Edgar and Kevin Seitzer. But through the first 4 games, not really looking like it. It's a 175 team batting average so far. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Yeah, they struck out a lot. Too many times. And once again, something that we've already seen them doing, and that's not good. 41 times through their first 4 games. And looking at a tweet by Sleeper MLB, basically talking about the collection of their main hitters and pointing out that it's a 175 team batting average. Here's the numbers for you. Jorge Polanco batting 500. Victor Robles batting 200. Julio Rodriguez batting 167. JP Crawford, haven't really spoken about him yet. He has gotten 1 hit, and it was basically a bloop into the outfield. He's only batting 091. Randy Arozarena batting 083. Cal Raleigh batting 083, though once again, Cal Raleigh walking, not too scared about that. Low batting average for him. Arozarena has a good approach at the plate, not too scared about him. But I do get concerned when I see JP Crawford hitting 091. And then there's other guys that aren't on this list, like Luke Raley. I know Mitch Garver's gotten a hit, but we haven't seen much from him. Donovan Solano, we haven't seen anything from him. In fact, he didn't swing at a pitch right down the freaking middle. We're talking about a professional hitter, right? Somebody that Jerry DiPoto touted as statistically one of the best hitters in the last 5 years or something that he said, 5-6 years in all of MLB, been one of the most consistent. And then all of a sudden he comes to Seattle and he chokes at the plate and he has a terrible approach. And it's not just Solano. You go back to, thank God that Julio hit that game-winning home run, and it was an absolute missile up to basically like the third deck in left field. But there were 2 strikeouts that Julio had the game before on Saturday. His last 2 at-bats where he literally struck out looking on pitches in the zone. Yeah, he looked frustrated, and it sounds like he used that anger to really go for it on Sunday and get the Mariners the 2-1 win over the Athletics with that late inning bomb. But you can't have your superstar missing pitches in the zone like that. And actually, that caused a couple of people online to react to some comments that the Oakland A's postgame show, crap, I knew I was going to do it at least once. They are not the Oakland A's any longer. They are the A's. A's broadcasters accusing Julio of not being a true superstar after that series. Are they right? I would say no, actually. This is another tweet from Sleeper, and really, really good stuff here. From age 21 to 23 since 1910, Julio's 15.5 FWAR ranks 13th behind Jim Fregosi and Francisco Lindor. A-Rod is 11th at 16.9 FWAR. Griffey 6th at 20. Post-World War II, he is 9th. Julio is 9th. He's second among active players, only after Mike Trout, ahead of Francisco Lindor, Manny Machado, and Mookie Betts. Not too bad. So Julio, a true superstar. I would say he is absolutely showing with his numbers. Yes, he is. A down season. Last year was a down season for him. He's still hitting the 270s, 20-some home runs, 80-plus near 80 or near 80-plus RBIs. Like, if that's a down season, then that guy's good. But really, beyond Julio, being that superstar player that we, at least in Seattle, should still believe that he is, he's still struggling with those strikeouts. Really frustrating to see him letting pitches go down the freaking, I would say one of them was down the middle. The other one was obviously in the zone and close enough to a point where you have to protect if you're a hitter with 2 strikes. And with that kind of stuff happening, the Mariners hitters, Julio included, essentially made a really mediocre starting pitching staff for the Oakland Athletics look like gods. Their starting staff, like led by, Luis Severino is good. He pitched 6 scoreless innings on opening day. But Jeffrey Springs, come on, is he that great? He had another 6-inning shutout in game 2 for the Mariners. And then A's starters over that first 4-game series only, we've heard it a couple of times, allowed 3 earned runs to the Mariners hitters. The Mariners managed 3 runs against the A's starters. They struck out 26 times against A's starters over 23 2/3 innings in just a 4-game stretch. That's not good offense, guys. So I would say there are parts where the offense looked really good. Yes, they got on base. They walked. They stole bases. They had a couple of really big hits, but they aren't hitting enough. They only had 1 double, and I believe that double was from Victor Robles that was almost a home run off of the fence or off of somebody's glove. So they're not really using the gaps. They're not using both sides of the field yet. Frankly, they're not really just hitting at all. But they walked and they hit a couple of home runs. So they got a couple of wins, at least the home runs coming at the key times. And still 2-2 in a series where they were outscored 14-8. I would say overall, that's a huge win for Dan Wilson's first series to open up a Major League Baseball season, but it ain't good enough. So, yeah, the Mariners, I would say sometimes on offense, yes, they're good. It's good compared to last year. And at other points, when they're just striking out nearly as much, absolutely not. And I do have to give credit really quickly before we move on to the defense. Tyler Soderstrom, he was just absolutely raking against the Mariners. I believe he extended his hitting streak to like 11 games over Seattle now. He's got like 3 bombs out of 4 games against them this weekend. And yeah, it was kind of crazy to see him just absolutely blowing up any Mariners pitcher that he saw. Mariner killer, Tyler Soderstrom, just had to point that out and give him his due. Add him to the long, long list of Mariners killers that come into T-Mobile Park and for some reason have more success than actual Mariners hitters. All right, off of the offense and onto the defense. How did the defense look compared to last season? Well, I think we all know that I could point to the one play by Jorge Polanco over the weekend and say that the defense looks so much worse, especially in the infield, than it did last year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Jorge Polanco essentially tried to bounce a ball off of the infield to Dylan Moore when he was trying to throw off of his back foot at third base on a pretty hard to field ball. He kind of had to turn away, from where he was going to make the throw and then go on his back foot, and essentially wasn't able to get any power in it. And I guess according to Ryan Divish, and this is good information that he gives us, Perry Hill, infield coach, teaches players to, if they don't have that power, if they're off their back foot, to bounce it off of the infield and give the first baseman, in this case it was Dylan Moore, a chance to scoop it. Well, you've got two players, first of all, that aren't in positions that they should be in. Dylan Moore is a great utility player, but he is not a first baseman by trade, so you can't expect him to make those plays on a consistent basis. And the Mariners play 5 freaking guys at first anyways, with Raley and Solano and Tellez, and hell, they might send Mitch Garver out there at some point. But that play by Jorge Polanco essentially was booted, and you can tell that Mariners infield doesn't really look that great defensively right now. J.P. Crawford had a ball pretty high over a first baseman's head. This is a former Gold Glove winner, and if he's not hitting, he damn well better be fielding, and he ain't even fielding right now. So I would say that the defense at this point looks a lot worse. I cannot believe they tried to sell me on this. You can't put a second baseman who has played there his entire career, healthy or not healthy, over at the hot corner, which is the hardest position to play in Major League Baseball, and say that he's going to have much more success there because he doesn't have to turn his body. He may not have to turn his body nearly as often to make a throw, but as you saw on this play at third base, Jorge still has to turn his body, and he has to make a throw that's a lot harder than a throw from second base. And for you to just assume that he can continue to play elite level defense over at a position that he's A, never been at, and B, is really, really hard, you're crazy. So we saw that kind of fall apart already. And Dylan Moore being at first base, that's absolutely terrible for the Mariners. And I don't know. I mean, maybe they should swap them at this point. Jorge at first and Dylan Moore at third. That would probably be making more sense because Jorge's getting older. But you can't have a gaggle of guys at first base and expect all those balls always to be scooped up. And you can't put a career second baseman at third and expect him to make those plays. It's just not going to happen. It absolutely hurt the Mariners. And I would say that hopefully long-term it's not going to affect them, but I could see a situation where that is going to cost them games later in the season if they leave Jorge Polanco at third base. We all know that the starting pitching is going to be fine. Obviously, the Mariners starters have shouldered so much. The weight of the world is on them because the Mariners offense is just so up and down, so inconsistent, and just never lives up to their reported potential that Jerry DiPoto says that they have. So, I'm not surprised when starters for the Mariners have an off day. I don't freak out like some people do. And frankly, they're all still young, so I was not surprised that they're going to be going through it a little bit. And they still don't even have George Kirby back from injury yet. Hopefully he just misses a start or two. But even through that, Logan Gilbert, a very impressive opening day start. He pitched 7 innings with 8 strikeouts, no walks, allowed 1 run in that time. That split finger changeup, nice pitch. Really looked like that was used very, very effectively during that start. Brian Wu, he made a really, really good start to open his season in the series finale. He only gave up 1 run over 6 innings, and that 0.72 ERA against the Athletics looks so good. And obviously, I would say probably the loudest screamer when Julio Rodriguez hit that go-ahead home run late in the game for Seattle. Some really good performances from your starting pitching over the weekend. Now, switching quickly to the bullpen, you kind of wonder, after giving up some home runs, if Saucedo or Carlos Vargas are going to have a job after Troy Taylor and Matt Brash return from injury. I'm assuming that Edward Bizardo, who gave up a couple of runs on Friday night, then turned around and pitched an inning and 2/3 of scoreless ball the next day, is probably going to be given a little bit longer of a leash. I just don't think he's a consistent enough relief pitcher, though, to be in a major league bullpen. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets pushed out. Gregory Santos, he looked pretty good in his 2 outings. Nice to see Gabe Spire back. He has some velocity, and he looked okay in his season debut. But frankly, I once again, you just look at this series overall, and you look at the A's pitching side of things, unfortunately, just made them look really good. And the Mariners pitchers still have a bunch of pressure on them. It's just a way different situation when, you're kind of Oakland playing with house money at this point. Severino, this extra guy that nobody thought that the Athletics were going to sign. I would say that they've got a little bit more confidence than Seattle does right now. The Mariners pitchers, yeah, they're excited. They know that they're talented, but once again, man, pitching with the weight of the world on their shoulders makes it a really tough situation going forward for Seattle. And I just hope nothing cracks and, that they're not sitting and just trying to win 2-1 games and 1-0 games all season while, starters on mediocre teams like the A's give up 3 runs in 4 games and strike out 26. Just can't happen. The Mariners just won't be a playoff team. I don't want to overreact to 4 games. So let us remember it is 4 games here. I tried to keep myself from going crazy over guys hitting 400 in the spring. I was happy about Mitch hitting that way, but I'm not sure it's going to carry over. I said about Mastroboni, hey, he's a great spring training hitter historically, but he doesn't actually translate that into the regular season. He's got to hit off the bench or 2 hits off the bench. So, of course, he wants to keep that batting average as high as possible. Just go 10 for 10 off the bench, kid, and you'll always have a job. But I'm not convinced that that's going to continue. All right. They're not facing guys working on stuff in the lab anymore. They're in real time stuff now, in real game stuff. It's back to reality for these Mariners hitters. Are they more aggressive than last season? Yes, but I don't know. It didn't look that great at times, but it's only 4 games. I'm going to hold judgment, until like the end of April. Like the team over the weekend wasn't as good at the plate as they needed to be, but I can wait. I can give them another month and see if it's just a couple of bad games or if there is still something truly wrong with the approach. I hope not. But hey, speaking of the approach, big news about those reported torpedo bats that the New York Yankees used in their opening series over the Milwaukee Brewers. Absolutely crushing 9 home runs in 1 game alone. 3 home runs in a row off of their starting pitcher, Nestor Cortez, former Yankee. Pretty funny that he was the guy that gave those up. I don't think it has anything to do with Nestor Cortez. I think it has to do with the wacky design of these torpedo bats. And essentially, there is a Yankees minor league hitting instructor. This is from a great article by Adam Jude of the Seattle Times. He says, a guy named Aaron Lenhart, he's an MIT-educated former physics professor, essentially has come up with an idea to build an experimental bat that moves the weight from the bat, like at the end where you never hit it, and puts more of the circumference of it, more of the meat of the bat near the trademark where people swing, where people try to get their hits, where essentially you're getting a lot more contact on the ball if you have more wood to hit it with. And if you go and you look at a picture of these, it's interesting. They look like torpedoes, but the Yankees going off with these torpedo bats. And thank God the Seattle Mariners, because they need to try absolutely anything at this point to fix their offense. The Mariners have ordered these torpedo bats. They are on the way. And according to Adam Jude in this article, players are curious to try them. Cal Raleigh's mentioned, Jorge Polanco, Julio Rodriguez says he'll give it a try. We'll see. They're not chomping at the bit, according to Adam Jude, to test these bats, but they're definitely curious. So, I love that, but you got to get these in the players' hands yesterday. And while they're at it, can we get a freaking engineer into T-Mobile Park so we can fix the wind issue? Can something be installed like we can force the wind to be tunneled away from the stadium, or we can build some vents up in the top level to try to send it directionally, like, through a distribution tunnel or something like that, away from the field of play? There's got to be a way to do that. Didn't the Guardians do that with their stadium like a year or 2 ago? Didn't they increase their home runs because they either blocked a wind tunnel or created something that sent balls out to right field, like on a rocket ship? It's 2025. Seattle, hire an engineer. And that is how I'm going to end this episode of Bleav in Mariners. Appreciate everybody sticking around. We'll be back later this week. I'll actually be in Hawaii doing the show, but reacting to the Mariners series versus the Tigers and diving into some more storylines. Hopefully we get George Kirby back soon, and hopefully we'll see a positive effect for the Mariners with those Torpedo bats. Make sure you like the podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Bleav In Mariners. 5-star rating on the Apple Podcast service really helps us out. And if you want more Bleav In Mariners content, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Until next time, Mariners fans, stay safe out there. Keep those tridents up. See you soon.